All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to unravel that massive, completely invisible ecosystem that somehow manages to bring every single product you rely on right to your front door. Ever stop to think about the sheer miracle it is that a product made thousands of miles away ends up in your hands in just a matter of days? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on this incredible machinery.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the invisible global web. Then, taming chaos with technology. After that, greening the supply chain. Next, building bridges to consumers. And finally, designing the perfect channel. Let's get to it.
Now, before we really get into the weeds, I've got to challenge an assumption a lot of us make. Think about it for a sec. When you picture moving a box on a truck or a forklift stacking pallets in a warehouse, are you picturing logistics or the supply chain? People mix these terms up constantly, but nailing the difference is absolutely crucial to understanding everything else we'll cover today.
Section 1. The invisible global web. Deconstructing the chain.
Let's clear up those definitions right off the bat so we're all on the same page. Basically, logistics is just one piece of the puzzle. It's the physical, micro-action, stuff like packaging, warehousing, delivery. It's strictly about getting a product to the right place at the right time, efficiently. But supply chain management, SCM, that's the macro ecosystem. That's strategic sourcing of raw materials, negotiating the best prices, and coordinating visibility across an incredibly vast network of partners from start to finish. If logistics is the muscle, supply chain management is the brain.
We used to think of a supply chain as the super simple, linear progression. You start with the raw material producer, move to the manufacturer, pass it to the distributor, the retailer, and finally the customer. It's a nice, clean idea, but it totally fails to capture today's reality. Because the reality is, we aren't dealing with a simple chain anymore. We're looking at a massively complex, interrelated web. A modern supply chain involves your suppliers and their suppliers. It pulls in third-party logistics, financial organizations, software vendors. It is a sprawling, tangled web of dependencies. And because it's a web, it is incredibly vulnerable. One snapped thread and the whole thing feels the vibration, right? A sudden shift in demand, like a new phone dropping and totally killing the demand for old cases, can halt production entirely. Or take natural disasters, like the brutal U.S. winter storms in 2015 or California droughts decimating crop yields. Even political upheaval, like the strikes that completely choked India's largest container port. Managing this web literally means managing constant, unpredictable chaos.
Section 2. Taming chaos with technology. Software to the rescue. So how on earth do organizations keep this fragile web from falling apart every single day? Well, software. Highly specialized software. They use modules for everything: forecasting demand, executing day-to-day manufacturing, inventory management, global logistics. But crucially, they rely on supply chain visibility software to proactively spot and anticipate risks before they crash the whole system. Technology is essentially the central nervous system keeping the global web functioning.
And it's amazing how cutting-edge tech solves these real-world bottlenecks in real time. We're way past tracking things on spreadsheets. With the Internet of Things, IoT, companies use sensors to track the exact temperature of perishable food in transit, guaranteeing safety. Meanwhile, big data and predictive analytics are literally figuring out the optimal spots for smart lockers in dense cities. This doesn't just add convenience, it heavily cuts down on single-item deliveries, which directly slashes greenhouse gas emissions.
Which brings us to Section 3, Greening the Supply Chain, the Ethical Mandate.
Those smart lockers reducing emissions tie perfectly into supply chain sustainability, or SCS. And to be clear, SCS goes way beyond just greenwashing your logistics. It's a holistic view. It means holding the entire web accountable for waste, carbon footprints, labor violations, deforestation, worker safety. You're only as responsible as your most irresponsible supplier, right? And honestly, socially responsible practices aren't just good for the planet. They build incredible brand awareness and drive long-term profitability.
So what are the actionable steps here? First, find the biggest offenders. Identify where the emissions and risks are highest. Then, track your KPIs using established guidelines like the ones from the World Wildlife Fund. I really love the collaboration aspect too. Imagine two manufacturers sending half-empty trucks to the exact same city. Why not share the vehicle and literally cut the pollution in half? Pair that with routine audits and buying carbon offsets for immediate impact, and you've got a roadmap for sustainable long-term survival.
Section 4. Building bridges to consumers. Distribution channels.
Okay, we've tamed the macro web. Now let's zoom in on the micro level.
How do we actually bridge the physical gap between a finished product in a warehouse and you, the buyer? That's your distribution channel. It's the bridge to the market. A company can spend millions making the perfect product, but if they don't design the right channel to make it accessible to the buyer exactly when and where they want it, it's going to fail. End of story. Imagine having to drive to a factory just to buy shampoo. Yeah, no one's doing that.
Let's look at how these consumer channels actually work. The absolute simplest is the zero-level channel, direct marketing. Zero intermediaries between the manufacturer and the consumer. Think Avon, Tupperware, or the original Amazon setup. You're dealing straight with the source.
Next up, the one-level channel, where we introduce a retailer. This is super common now because retailers have just gotten so massive. Think about a giant like Walmart. They have so much buying power that it makes total economic sense for manufacturers to skip wholesalers entirely and supply these super retailers directly.
Then we build into the two-level channel, adding a wholesaler to the mix. And this is highly practical, especially for smaller local retailers. They just don't have the capital or the demand to buy directly from a factory. They need wholesalers to buy in massive bulk, store the inventory, and then break those shipments down into smaller, affordable chunks.
Section 5. Designing the perfect channel. Tire company case study.
Let's ground all this theory with a real-world challenge. Say you're the marketing manager for a tire company trying to crack the vast US market. You're selling a highly specialized safety system. These tires can keep driving even if they're burst or literally shot out. Pretty intense, right? The catch is you absolutely cannot use a one-size-fits-all distribution channel. A police department buys very differently than a commercial trucking fleet, and both buy completely differently than an everyday commuter.
So look at how they handle it by brilliantly segmenting the market. For government clients, armies, ambulances, the market is super dispersed, and they won't just take a new brand's word on safety. So the company uses an indirect channel, relying on trusted distributors to properly explain the features. But for the private sector, like massive trucking companies, they pivot to direct tie-ups. Those are huge buyers requiring high-level upper management negotiation. And for the general public, everyday drivers only buy 1 to 4 units at a time. You can't manage millions of tiny direct orders, so they go indirect again, through wholesalers down to the local repair shops that people trust. It is an absolute masterclass in pivoting your channel strategy.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. Take a second to look at the device you're watching this on right now. Think about the raw materials sourced, the global manufacturing, the risks mitigated by software, the emissions tracked, and the specific distribution channels navigated just to get it into your hands. Every physical item around you is the endpoint of a brilliant, invisible web. The only question is, how sustainable will that web be tomorrow?